At the towering glass and steel headquarters of Martech Industries, preparations were underway for a monumental business deal. Today was supposed to be the crowning moment of Richard Langston's career. The billionaire CEO, known for his steely presence and towering achievements in global mergers, was about to finalize a strategic alliance with Lianhua Tech, a powerful Chinese conglomerate. Media outlets were circling like hawks, and stock analysts were already buzzing about a historic press release. Everything had been arranged down to the second. The conference room was pristine, the catering top-notch, and security on high alert. Yet, one critical component was still missing as the clock struck 9:57 a.m. "Where the hell is the translator?" Richard barked at his assistant, Nora, who had been pacing nervously. I called her. She's not picking up. Her office said she called in sick this morning, she stammered. Sick? She's the only Mandarin English interpreter in the entire city who's qualified for a deal of this scale, he growled. Richard's well-practiced calm was evaporating. The double doors opened. In walked the Chinese delegation, 5 sharply dressed executives, including Mr. Zhao, the CEO of Lianhua Tech. They bowed politely. Smiles were exchanged. But soon, the room's energy began to shift. The air was dense with unspoken confusion. Nora attempted to bridge the silence by offering refreshments. Richard tried to maintain appearances, grinning through gritted teeth as he pointed at the visual aids, clueless if the visitors could follow a word he was saying. Lianhua's executives exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. And then, utter silence. Richard Langston, master of boardrooms, stood powerless. Just then, a subtle sound disrupted the tension, the faint squeak of rubber soles on polished marble floors. In the corner of the room, unnoticed until now, was a janitor. He had been quietly emptying trash bins and wiping fingerprints off glass doors. He wore blue overalls, old sneakers, and yellow gloves. On his ID badge, Darius Benton. Night staff. He looked up. "Mr. Langston," he said, his voice calm, confident. "Would you like me to translate?" Richard blinked. "You?" Darius nodded. He pulled off one glove, stepped forward, and in flawless Mandarin, greeted Mr. Zhao and his team. Their faces lit up with surprise and relief. The room transformed. Darius translated with poise, precision, and a deep cultural understanding that brought comfort to both parties. He smoothed over awkward phrasing, explained idioms, and even added subtle context that elevated the conversation. Mr. Zhao smiled. He laughed. Richard saw the ice break and melt into something resembling admiration. When the meeting ended an hour later, the deal was still alive. And Richard Langston looked at Darius Benton not as a janitor, but as something far more valuable. The next morning, Martech's executive floor buzzed with rumors. Who was the janitor who had just saved the biggest international deal of the year? Why did no one know he spoke fluent Mandarin? And why was someone with such talent cleaning floors instead of leading meetings? Nora tapped through employee files, trying to locate Darius Benton. What she found only deepened the mystery. His resume was sparse, a janitorial hire made through a third-party contractor. No education history, no references, no social media footprint. It was as if he had purposely erased his past. Richard, intrigued and slightly unnerved, requested to meet Darius in his office. "Darius, I owe you," the CEO began, motioning to the guest chair. Darius sat with quiet confidence. "Just doing what was needed, sir." "That wasn't just doing what was needed. That was surgical diplomacy. You earned their trust, and you saved this company from an international disaster. Darius smiled faintly. Thank you. Where did you learn Mandarin like that? Beijing Normal University. I majored in Chinese literature. Richard blinked. Wait, you studied in China? Yes, sir. I also interned at a few Chinese media outlets before coming back home. Then why are you sweeping floors here? Life took some unexpected turns. I had family responsibilities. I needed something stable and under the radar. Richard paused. That answer held 1,000 unspoken stories. He respected that. But the company and the deal needed him now. Darius, I want you at tomorrow's follow-up meeting with Lianhua. As our official interpreter. Not as janitor. Are you willing? Darius hesitated for the first time. It may raise eyebrows. Let them raise. You've already proven yourself. The next day, Darius arrived not in overalls, but in a tailored charcoal suit Richard had personally arranged. As he entered the executive conference room, heads turned. The same businessmen who had seen him emptying bins now stood to greet him with respectful bows. The second round of negotiations was more complex. Legal clauses, technical specs, and cultural sensitivities. But Darius moved through them like water, harmonizing every point of friction with fluency and finesse. Mr. Zhao spoke to Richard at one point, smiling. He has the heart of a Confucian scholar. We trust him. And just like that, the deal was not only salvaged, but elevated. Back at Martech, whispers turned into headlines. Janitor turned Translator saves billion-dollar deal. Board members demanded to know why such talent had been hidden. HR panicked. Richard, however, felt proud. But Darius, despite the rising fame, remained quiet. Polite. Controlled. Because he knew, the past he left behind was not gone. And it was coming. By the following week, the partnership between Martech and Lianhua was making global headlines. Stock prices soared. Media coverage highlighted the cultural diplomacy that had turned potential failure into triumph. And every headline featured Darius Benton. Talk shows invited him. Articles profiled him. Universities reached out to ask him to speak. But Darius declined them all. He wasn't chasing fame. In fact, he'd spent the last 5 years running from visibility. At Richard's request, Darius was offered a full-time executive position, Director of Cross-Cultural Strategy. It came with a corner office, an elite team, and a 7-figure salary. But Darius didn't sign immediately. One night, Richard invited Darius to his private lounge in the upper penthouse of the building. The lights of the city twinkled below. You haven't accepted the offer. Why? Darius swirled the tea in his glass. Because the more I rise, the more visible I become. Who are you hiding from? Darius took a breath. I was working with an NGO in Hong Kong during the democracy protests. I exposed corruption tied to illegal corporate backers, dangerous people. My name was on documents I published. There were threats. My mentor disappeared. I fled back home. Richard leaned forward. You're saying people might come for you? They might. That's why I went off the grid. Changed jobs. Disappeared. But now you've re-emerged in the brightest spotlight imaginable, Richard said. Darius gave a quiet nod. Later that week, Lian Hua invited Martech's leadership to Beijing for a cultural gala. Darius hesitated but agreed to go. In Beijing, Darius was treated like royalty. Mr. Zhao introduced him personally to China's vice premier. Old friends from his university days reappeared. But in the crowd, Darius noticed someone. A man in a gray jacket. Watching. Not clapping. Not smiling. That night, a note was slipped under his hotel door /*. You were warned. Darius handed it to Richard and the security team. Within hours, Chinese authorities were notified. The next day, 2 suspects were arrested at the airport attempting to leave the country under false passports. Mr. Zhao later informed Darius, "The government remembers your bravery. They protected you then. They will again." Back home, Darius finally accepted the executive position. His first action as director? Launching a mentorship program for underrepresented youth fluent in multiple languages. Hidden talents, he said, deserve more than invisible lives. He recruited young people from overlooked communities, immigrants, bilingual students, first-generation college grads, and placed them in internships, training programs, and language immersion courses. Martech rebranded part of its diversity strategy around the initiative. Media praised it as visionary. Other corporations followed suit. But for Darius, it was personal. "No one gave me a lift when I was scraping floors," he told a group of interns one afternoon. "So I built the staircase myself. Now it's your turn to climb." One evening, a letter arrived at Martech addressed to Darius. It was from the family of his former mentor in Hong Kong. "Thank you for continuing the work," it read. "Your courage inspires from across the ocean." Richard watched as Darius read the letter silently, then folded it and placed it in his pocket. "You okay?" Richard asked. "Yeah," Darius replied, his voice strong. "I'm finally where I belong." The next board meeting began with a surprise. Richard opened by saying, "I'd like to nominate our new Vice President of International Ethics and Strategy." All eyes turned to Darius. The vote was unanimous. That night, on the rooftop of Martech, Richard and Darius shared a quiet toast. "From janitor to VP in under a month," Richard said. "That has to be some kind of record." Darius smiled. "Just means the next chapter starts now." The wind picked up slightly as they looked out over the city skyline. Darius felt the weight of fear lift from his shoulders. He had walked through fire, stayed humble, and emerged not just respected, but transformed. The janitor was gone. The leader had arrived.